Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remus.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily as we count down to Labor Day weekend and the Labor Day Classic between the Bombers and Riders. Andrew Paterson with you. Michael Remus away this week. We will bring in my guy Connor Hrabchak in just a minute and dive into the latest on the Bombers. They are just finishing up practice out at Princess Auto Stadium. Going to be a real fun one. Before he leaves on his Italian vacation, Ken Wiebe will be joining us. We'll get his thoughts on, looking ahead to Jet training camp, which is basically going to be upon us by the time Ken gets back. We will also get Ken's thoughts on Labor Day, Bombers, Riders, and what we'll be enjoying when we get to Regina on the weekend. By the way, shout out to everyone from the 1930 crew. The entire trip is sold out. Cannot wait to see you guys on Saturday. It is going to be a blast. And all the Bomber fans that are heading to Regina for the annual pilgrimage for the most fun weekend of the year when it comes to the Canadian Football League. Brandon Rewucki is going to jump on at about 20 as well. We'll get Brandon's thoughts on the trade last week and a little bit of his thoughts on the upcoming NFL season. And then later on, it's sort of been fantasy football week. I got a draft tonight. I know many of you are still getting ready to make your picks. From the Athletic Fantasy, the coach, Gene Clemons, coming on the program for his first time. Really looking forward to that. And we might even pop in with our friends at Sport Manitoba, depending on how things go this afternoon as well. Big shout out to everybody in chat. Great to see you all today. I see Connor with his big blue mark and the wrench waving to everybody. We'll get him in here in just a second. And, of course, we'll hit the track. Cinnamon Downs is back tonight. Goldeyes as well. And then our cool bet lines. And then CFL 110 premieres right after Winnipeg Sports Talk today, about 3:10. If you're listening on the podcast, do us a favor, wherever you get Winnipeg Sports Talk, hammer in CFL 110 and give us a sub there. And, of course, you can also watch the video version with the full rundown. Remus does a great job producing that. That'll be available after the program today on the Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube channel. Of course, CFL 110 is brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg. Thanks again to them for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. And, of course, thanks to all of our sponsors, including Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Rollies Transfer, Consolidated Supply, and Manitoba Battery, F Apparel, Canadian Club, Wallace & Wallace, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, The Beer Can, along with Next Door and Hoagie Boys, Little Brown Jug, the Winnipeg Goldeyes, Breezy Bend, Assiniboia Downs, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, and we will get to a why not question of the day for Not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray. Let's get this show on the road. Hi, Hockey Mom. Hi, Phyllis, and everyone saying hi. Really nice vibe in the chat today. Let's get Connor in here and get things going. What's going on, dude? How are you?
I'm doing great. Spent the morning with good WST friend Gavin Spittle on the Spits and Suds podcast, having a chat with him. I've been on that podcast a few times, so stay tuned for that in the coming days, doing a little Jets season preview. So that was really fun this morning. Other than that, just preparing for the show, ready to go.
Hey, let me ask you this. I'm always interested, and it's always fun doing shows outside of market. What was Spittle interested in about the Winnipeg Jets? Like when people from outside of the market in the division are sort of poking around on the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, what was he putting to you?
Well, he wanted to know about the trade for sure, the McGroarty-Jaeger swap. I think that's the biggest news. He was wondering, what my thoughts were on just the Jets in general this upcoming season and whether or not I thought that they're going to take a step back, because that's kind of the perception, because they lost Monahan to Foley, Brossoit, Dillon, a lot of key departures there. So that was kind of the overarching thing. He was interested in my thoughts on the Stars too. And I don't know, Stars fans don't love the Lyubushkin signing and Matt Dumba, but I still think the Stars are the best team in the Central. But as for what he was asking about for the Jets, He thought they did pretty well on the trade, all things considered, which we talked about yesterday as well, given the context of everything. And he's wondering if youth will play more of a factor this year because of the departures, and maybe they take a step back, things of that nature. But it was a great conversation, so I recommend people check it out when it does come out.
You know what? Now that we're close to a week out from the trade, I guess 6 days now, it has been absolutely fascinating to see the reaction and the evaluation of this trade from person to person, scout to scout. I mean, I think people agree that it's a really interesting trade of two players that are, similar in prospect value, but, very different players and kind of project to be different in the National Hockey League. Like, Grant McCagg is a guy that's been on with us quite a bit. I mean, he was really complimentary to the Jets, and he sort of described it as like, you kind of know what you're getting from Rucker. He's going to be a player that he's going to play. He's going to be a physical force. He's certainly not a burner, and there is questions as to how he will be able to, not survive, but, listen, keep up, basically. I mean, in a game that continually gets faster and faster. But at every level so far, he's been a guy that's been a difference maker. And listen, he's a power forward. He is a player that will score plenty of goals, in around the net, in that goal scoring area there. The Jaeger thing, from a few people, they've said that he has a higher ceiling in that, if it all comes together, if he continues to develop the way that he has, he can turn into a very, very valuable two-way player in center that's responsible for plays, but also have that offense. And certainly I think that is quite attractive to the Winnipeg Jets as well. You'll have some that say Pittsburgh got the better player. You'll have some that say Winnipeg did. And it's kind of rare, Connor, that you get a trade like that you can make legitimate arguments on both sides. And the funny thing about it is that we're never going to really know who did win this trade or how it worked out for both teams until we kind of fast forward 4 or 5 years down the line to see both of these young men turn into finished products as National Hockey Leaguers.
Yeah, and the fact, I agree with you, and the fact that we're saying that and agreeing on that, I think is a win for the Jets. I've said this whole time that Rutger McGroarty, a public trade request, that usually is like a death sentence for a general manager trying to get equal value for a trade. But the fact that we're having the debate of who's the better prospect or who has the higher ceiling, and the fact that he was drafted in the same slot just 1 year later, like, I think that when you take all of that into account, Cheveldayoff did pretty well here. And yeah, I mean, it's tough to say, oh, the Jets won or the Penguins won, because we'll really know 7 years from now which player turned out to be better. But on the surface right now, getting equal value or very close to equal value for Rutger McGroarty, given all the public noise surrounding him over the past couple of months, is a big win for the Jets.
Now, listen, our focus obviously here for most fans in and around Winnipeg and Manitoba is on Labor Day weekend and the biggest weekend of the year in the Canadian Football League and the Banjo Bowl. But training camp going to be getting going when we get into September, not too long. And this is important for all of you to know. FanFest is happening on Saturday, September 21st. And it is actually a game day. That's going to be a very busy day for all of us that day. But if you do want to take in FanFest, which is really an awesome, awesome event, perfect to bring out kids. And if you want to get a little closer to the players, they don't have a lot of time during the season, especially now with this break in the middle for the Four Nations Cup, to kind of get up close with the players, maybe get some autographs and get closer. This is the day to do it. Tickets for the event today are free, but they went on sale, if you will, to be claimed this morning at 10 a.m. So if you're thinking about going to FanFest, I would suggest you get to the Winnipeg Jets website today and grab those and be a part of it. And, we had such a fun time setting up last year. We talked to a few of the fellows, recorded for the podcast for the upcoming week. I imagine we'll do something similar as well. We won't be having a jersey unveil like we did last year, which was quite exciting. But we had such a great time meeting so many others. I see Bailey here. And by the way, shout out to Bailey, who has completely accepted the trade and moved on as the president of the Rucker McGroarty fan club and is now rocking the Bailey the Intern Jager's #1 fan. We got to move on, Bay. You're doing a great job with that. I know she'll be there. So mark that down. September 21st, Winnipeg Jets Fan Fest, and go to the site right now. Click on that link and make sure you get tickets before they are gone. One other thing I should let everybody know, and I know there's been a lot of questions about the upcoming season, a WST pack. We had such a great time going to the games last year with so many of you. I've got very good news. Met with our friends at the Jets yesterday. We will be doing something similar. We are working on dates right now, as well as a couple of options to maybe give some of you some added flexibility where we pick WST games. But if, for instance, that maybe one of those games doesn't work for you, the ability to get a different game as part of the package and join us for 2 or 3 of the games if you weren't able to do all 4. Obviously, get the benefits of being a Jets package member and, doing, everyone's part to, help put some butts in the seats and support the team at the same time. So next week, we should have all of those details. And I know a lot of people away for the final part of August. We'll get everybody back next week and really make a push on that. And I think we're also discussing maybe a game or 2 either in conjunction with the WST nights or maybe one just completely aside where we do a straight up group night where if you want to bring the entire family and a bunch of friends, try and do a big group for a game. So building off the success we had last year with the WST package, really pumped to be working with the Jets again. And we will have those details for you next week on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And get ready for the opening part of the season. I got to say, Connor, and I don't know what it was. I think maybe it was the fact that it got significantly cooler on Monday from just how hot and steamy it was on the weekend, that it sort of hit me. Labor Day is here. Next week, kids are, I believe, going back to school, although maybe with it being so early, maybe it's the following week. But hockey is just about here as well. We got NFL Kickoff. It coincides with all your fantasy drafts that we're about to get back to business after a great summer. But I'll tell you what, I'm really looking forward to it. And obviously super excited to continue the WST pack and get our crew together cheering on our team this year at Canada Life Center.
Yeah, those WST packs, obviously I'm up in the press box for the games, but coming down before, saying hi to everyone, those were so much fun. You talked about FanFest last year, and you guys had this set up there. I was gone last year, so I didn't get to experience that. I left on the Saturday morning of that awesome event. So I'm super excited to be there this year, Saturday, September 21st. Looking forward to that. And like you said, it's going to be a morning skate FanFest, and then they have a preseason game at home that night, obviously at home, 7 p.m. against the Minnesota Wild. So that'll be a pretty busy day. But Labor Day, this is the best time. I don't know if you agree, but I think early September into October, I think this is the best time to be a sports fan. The hockey's coming back, NFL starting, the CFL season really swings into full gear. And with how wide open the CFL started, you've talked about it the past couple of shows. It is like we're starting from scratch. It's like the CFL season is starting this weekend, and then NFL and NHL starting. So I'm super pumped. Labor Day is the start of it all. And then the next 6-7 months are going to just be hockey, football. It's going to be so awesome. I can't wait.
Well, you know what? This is a great little segue to a why not question of the day. Because I'm with you. I mean, I get so excited at this point for the start of the NFL season and hockey being back and the pennant races in baseball. I mean, it is certainly up there. The other time that I think rivals it is April and I mean, listen, it's also the change of the seasons, right? Baseball is back. You get the Masters. You get the beginning of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I mean, the first 2 weeks of the playoffs in the first round is pretty tough to to beat as well. So why not question of the day for Not Autocorp and Waverly and McGillivray? Is the best time to be a sports fan the next month? Is it April? Or is it some other time? Let us know in the chat. at which point you were most. I mean, to be honest, we're sports fans 12 months a year. So, I mean, there are some ups and downs. This is a little bit of a lull right now. Although it is giving us a chance to pay attention to some pretty good, some great pennant races in baseball right now. How about the Royals, by the way, beating the Guardians last night in Cleveland? They lost 100 games last year and are now tied for first place. An incredible turnaround. And Bobby Witt Jr. might turn into the Patrick Mahomes of baseball for the Kansas City Royals. Now, one player I don't think can have the effect on a team the way a quarterback can in football. But man, a really, really interesting turnaround. And I think maybe giving some hope to some of the other teams that have been so poor for so long. The Royals, and with those smaller market teams, you sort of do have to take your lumps and suck for a few years and then identify a window and really lean into it. And that seems what the Royals are doing right now. But listen, Connor, let's get to Bomber practice, because all eyes on Winnipeg coming out of their game on Hamilton. The first bit of great news we got late yesterday afternoon when Mike O'Shea spoke was that Stanley Bryant is expected to play on Sunday. And I think we all agreed, first and foremost, we were worried about Stanley Bryant's health. The fact that he potentially or is expected to play is just massive for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, considering they're going in. And then a little bit more good news today, apparently a number 4 running around the practice field.
Yeah, Adam Bighill placed on the 6-game injured list prior to the game last week against Hamilton. Obviously, one of the most confusing things, 6-game injured list, you're like, oh, the guy's out 6 games. No, they just have to be out a minimum of 1. And he was actually practicing today. We haven't got the official practice report as to whether it was limited practice or a full practice. I'm going to assume, given it's his first practice back and it's still Wednesday, that it was a limited practice for Adam Bighill, but still great to see him out there after that non-contact injury on the road in BC. And the Bombers defense, no question marks really about them in the win over Hamilton. It was more the offense and the turnovers. And the special teams made a great play as well, getting that touchdown. But getting Adam Bighill, the leader, the communicator, the quarterback of the defense, back for the Labor Day Banjo Bowl home and home would be massive. So great sign to see him practicing Wednesday, because if he was limited maybe on the last practice of the week, maybe it's a little bit more of a question mark. But if he can be limited today, ramp up a little bit, you could see him out there. And then with the news of Stanley Bryant, the Bombers might be at full health going into Sunday, which would be a great, great sign and great for their chances of taking over first in the West.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, considering where my head was at coming out of the game on Friday, I mean, man, if Bighill can play, I mean, that is just a bonus. But I mean, Stanley Bryant, I've used this term, he is a pillar of this football team in a lot of ways, part of the organization. But I mean, going up against Saskatchewan and that defense without Stanley Bryant is it's a scary thought. And I'll give the guys a lot of credit, guys that were in there. I mean, particularly for the way that they were able to run the football. Now, of course, Brady Oliveira deserves a ton of that credit as well. He has really turned into like a battering ram with ballet shoes, if you will, because he has been able to make moves. But man, he's punishing guys each and every time he gets the football. And I mean, the last few games, he's running at like a 7+ yard per carry clip. And that is a huge part of it. I mean, what do you think? Like, what is your feeling just about the game? I mean, obviously we're Bomber fans, and from a Bomber perspective, I mean, do you go in there thinking that there's a good chance they win? Are you sort of nervous? It's not an easy place to play, and it's not an easy place to win, which goes without saying. It is sort of weird, though. Saskatchewan, for all the good things that they've done right now this year, are 0-4-1 in their last 5. But like Hamilton always says, you want to change the narrative, just wait a minute. All that changes if they can get a win against the Bombers. There is so much on the line in this game. It is as good of a setup for a Labor Day game as I can remember.
Yeah, there's so much on the line. It's gonna be electric, especially in that stadium. If you're heading there on the bus, that'll be fun. But my feeling of this game, I don't know. Like, I watched Saskatchewan last week too against Toronto, and how their offense didn't really impress me that much either. And I just feel like this game is a race to 17 or maybe like a race to 20 points, and whoever gets there first is going to win. I just feel like this is going to be so low scoring, two really good defenses, two struggling offenses going head to head. And maybe Kenny Lawler can make a big play, or Ontario Wilson, Nick Dembski, Brady Oliveira moving the ball on the ground are going to have to make some big explosive offensive plays, because I think this is going to be a defensive battle. And in those games, it's really hard to kind of have a lean one way or the other. Like if there's only going to be 27 points scored total in this game, it's going to be close right down to the end. But I think it's going to be very similar to the game we saw Bombers Riders earlier on in the season, which was very low scoring. They were just running the ball. Trevor Harris wasn't playing in that game. But the Bombers were right there till the end. Nick Dembski doesn't fumble that ball on that last drive. They're right there. That's a game. I think we'll see something similar. I do think the Bombers defense is going to play a lot better than they did that first game against Saskatchewan, maybe force a few turnovers as well. Trevor Harris, I wasn't really impressed with him against Toronto last week. I don't know if you watched that game, Huss, but he can't move. He's not very mobile. So if the Bombers are able to get the pass rush there, maybe get him to try and move, that's when you're going to force turnovers. And if they can stop the run and force those second and longs, getting Trevor Harris, dropping back to pass, the pass rush on him, I think the Bombers will have a good chance. And I do feel a little bit better than okay for this game. I know that's not convincing, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think this game is really a toss-up. The Riders are 2.5 point favorites. They kind of get the 3 points for home field advantage. So they are a slight favorite, but anyone can win this game. Listen, from my perspective, the guy that I'm most looking forward to and seeing what he's got is is Zach Collaros. In a way, I think what happened on Friday actually could really help the Bombers, because Zach knows, everybody knows, you throw 3 picks against Saskatchewan on the Labor Day game, you're not winning. And it's not like, he just, by the way, happy birthday to Zach. He had his birthday yesterday. They all serenaded him with happy birthday at practice, which was a nice scene. He hasn't been at his best for the most part this year, but man, he was good when they needed it. And I think that just reinforces a level of confidence that this unit, and Zach Collaros in particular, has earned over the course of the last number of years, winning the way they have with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They've also been very comfortable going into Mosaic in the Mike O'Shea area, certainly in the last few years, winning a number of games, not necessarily always on Labor Day, but certainly come playoff time and some other dates. But to me, I think that, if anything, this might actually prepare Winnipeg and prepare Zach for a bigger game. Like, I was just on with Dusty, and he said the exact same thing with you. Like, we were looking at the lines, and he's like 47.5. I don't know how low you would have to put this number to make me think that it's going over. And I sort of agree. If you had to ask me right now what I think the score in the game will be, regardless of who wins, 21-19, 22-20. Like, I kind of see that low 40s number. It was only 28 points scored between the two. Just watch it be like 17 all after the first quarter. That's the funny thing, the way this CFL season has gone so far. But no doubt, I think there is a little bit more pressure, expectations for Zach to bring it up. But I'll tell you what, you get Stanley Bryant back. That's huge for him and the offense. And we can't forget about Drew Wolodarski. And Wolodarski coming back off the 6th game, while he isn't the game breaker that a guy like Kenny Lawler is, another very trusted, reliable receiver that Zach knows very well. If Wolodarski's there, Nick Dembski's in the lineup, you've got Kenny Lawler. I think at this point, at least post game 2, with the Lawler and Schoen injuries, this will be the best setup the Bomber offense has for Zach Collaros to be comfortable. And the bottom line is he's going to need to have one of his best games of the season if they expect to come back on the highway on Monday. They'll be flying. We will be. But a first place team, which again is just so wild to talk about considering the way this year started.
Yeah, I agree. And Zach Collaros needing to have one of his best games of the season doesn't mean he has to throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, the win against BC where he had 288 yards and 1 touchdown, that is the formula. You move the ball well. You keep it with Brady Oliveira. You get into second and short, third and short when Chris Trevler can take over, and maybe you punch in a few more of these drives like we've been saying for weeks here on this show, not stalling out in the red zone, in the green scoring zone when you need those 6 points. But again, he doesn't have to throw 4 touchdowns. He just needs to not turn the ball over, make big plays when they're there, but most importantly, make the short passes. Last week in the red zone, he skied that flat route to Brady Oliveira, which resulted in an interception. That's just unacceptable. You can't have that against the Saskatchewan Roughriders especially. But yeah, if he can keep the chains moving, hit those short passes, maybe get the odd explosive play. I don't think we'll see many from Winnipeg that aren't Brady Oliveira led. But again, yeah, he doesn't have to throw 350 yards and 4 touchdowns to have a great game. He just needs to manage the ball well, which has been kind of an inconsistent part of his game so far this year. So I'm interested to see how he handles that on the road in that environment against that defense.
Well, we didn't see a lot of it last week, but the week before we saw the Lawler effect on the other receivers. And let's not forget Nick Dembski. You know, he had that fumble on what was just an incredible play by the Saskatchewan defender. I mean, there's been some fumbles by Nick and other guys, and I'm like, hey, you got to have that. I almost give a pass on that one just because of what a great play that it was. But when it comes down to it, Nick knows a thing or two about having big games in Saskatchewan. And if we're not talking about Brady Oliveira, I wouldn't be surprised if he does a little touchdown dance, reminding them what they lost when he came back from Saskatchewan and signed with Winnipeg. Connor, great stuff. Hang tight. We'll look forward to catching up with you a little later on today. He is wearing 49er red. I'm sure he'll have an NFL take or two after the coach Gene Clemons comes on with us later on today. But Brandon Rewucki's coming up. Don't forget CFL 110 right after Winnipeg Sports Talk today, brought to you by our friends at Garage Living Winnipeg. We'll tell you about them during CFL 110, but you can't give them a call at 204-999-1234. Our pal Pat Kanuga, ready to revolutionize your garage. Check them out at garageliving.com for more information, and you can call Pat for all of their work. Give Pat a call, 204-999-1234, to set up a little meeting on what they can do for you before the snow flies. If you've got a move coming up, head on over to Rollies.com, because Rollies Transfer, proud sponsor of WST, the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba, family owned and operated for over 60 years. Listen, their logistics business takes them all around the province daily, throughout southern Manitoba, the city of Winnipeg, which means flexible timing and routes for you and great prices on your move. And in addition to the legendary white glove treatment of Rollies, Rollies has a special deal for WST customers. If you go to their website, Rollies.com, top right corner, you'll see the request a quote feature. Let them know when and where you're moving and what you're moving. You can even upload pictures of furniture and boxes for a better, more accurate quote. But use the promo code WST, because through our partnership with Rollies, they've got a special discount for moving services and moving supplies for Winnipeg Sports Talk listeners. So if you do have a move coming up, use the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba for over 60 years and get the white glove treatment from Rollies. Go to Rollies.com for more information and to request your quote today. Got to shout out our friends at Consolidated Supply. As the summer winds down, they're there for you for a multitude of options, including, of course, the leaders in irrigation services and systems here in Manitoba, working with the golf industry for so many years. And speaking of golf, if you're thinking about that dream putting green in your backyard, they're also the leaders in artificial turf supplies and installation. Golf carts, they're the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba. Last time you got in a golf cart at your favorite golf course, chances are it was from Consolidated Supply. They can help you with those as well, both new and used. Other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchens. And of course, they're the leaders in small engine parts and repair. Consolidated Supply is open to the public. Beautiful showroom. Check them out. 1395 Niagara Road East, or check them out online today at cte.ca. And just before we bring in Brandon Rewucki, one more long weekend coming up, and I know many of you are going to be back out at the lake, on the boat, camping, maybe hitting the ATV. All our summer toys got to be powered up, and Manitoba Battery's been doing it for years as your local option to give you the best price in town on batteries of all shapes and sizes. Literally, whatever your battery needs are, Manitoba Battery has them, and you will get the best price in town, beating the pants off the big box stores. Pop by and see them in person, Logan Avenue, or their new location at 452 Dover Court Drive. But in the meantime, check them out online at manitobabattery.com. And if you don't have time to pop in and see them, they will deliver your batteries to you for free anywhere in the city of Winnipeg with any purchase over $60. It is just that easy. Shop online today, manitobabattery.com, and tell Donnie and the gang that the boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. All right, let's get Brandon Rewucki in and catch up with our pal from Skates and Plates. Rew, what's going on? Oh, wait a second. I think we got you muted. Yeah, I don't think your mic's on, dude. Either that or turn it on. Let's see go. Ooh, we don't see a mic connection from you as well, which is a bit of an issue. I tell you what, if you want, you can always pop out and pop back in and see if that'll work out. Just make sure that connection's good. We'll get Brandon back in just a minute. And of course, you can check out Brandon's work when the mic is working. Skates and Plates, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Okay, we see a mic now. I think we've got a good chance of hearing from Brandon, not just looking at him. What's up?
Are we good?
We're back.
There we go. Beauty. I'm doing good, man. I just had a nice little lunch. Fantasy football cram session in effect, so can't complain too much right now.
No, it is the fantasy football draft season is upon us. This final week of August, we used to dread it so much as a kid. Oh my God, got to go back to school. I embrace it now. It got a little cooler this week. I'm like, that's fine. That means hockey training camps are right around the corner. The NFL is about to kick off, and we're getting down to the meat of the CFL schedule, beginning with Labor Day. Hey, just quickly on that, what are your thoughts on this Bomber Rider game on Sunday with the great news that Stanley Bryant looks like he's going to play, and now Adam Bighill back at practice along with Drew Wolitarsky? Some help for the club coming at a perfect time, considering how sketchy that win over Hamilton was. But again, like Paul Maurice said, you never critique a win. Although we do.
Yeah, and I never really agreed with that. But what I would say is, watching the game, I actually, once the second half got underway, I kind of thought that it might be a game the Bombers led Bo Levi Mitchell and company back in, because you mentioned the Stanley Bryant issue in the first quarter, and then they lost their second O-lineman there in the second quarter, I believe. You lose two starting O-linemen in a game, Huss, and it's going to get real dicey for you real quick. And I think that's what we saw, where the Bombers offense really started to stall in the second half. Thankfully, Zach was able to rewind the clock a little bit, and we got that late fourth quarter magic. And completely erasing what would have been a disastrous result for the Bombers there. But I can kind of understand, and I'll maybe put a little more credence into the dominant first half than the, oh my gosh, the Bombers are choking second half. And with Brian back in the fold, I think the offense is going to be in a much better place. I liked what you were saying earlier, that all signs point to this being an under 40-point game combined, which means we'll get fireworks in the first half at a 2020 game. Yeah. But I'm going to lean the way that we're all kind of expecting this one to go. Pretty well, though, that the Bombers haven't really missed Bighill yet so far, Huss. Not that you won't welcome back into the lineup, but the defense is just stout right now. It's the most exciting part of the team. But I kind of like, even with the way that game unfolded, it might seem a little counterintuitive to say this, but I like the way the Bombers are starting to round into form here, Huss. And hopefully that final fourth quarter drive, hopefully they don't need in Saskatchewan, but hopefully that's maybe the final kickstart that brings this offense to life and where it was the past couple years.
You know what? As well as things have been going, I think it may have been, just another painful reminder at times that if this team doesn't take care of the football, they will not be winning the games that they need to win. And we saw that in spades earlier on this season. And the only reason that game was, as close as it was that the offense wasn't really moving the football, and even worse, turning the football over. And listen, Zach Collaros doesn't need any advice from you or me. I mean, the guy is, a legend in this league, here in this city with this football team. But listen, sometimes you just have games where you're not exactly off, or you make a few decisions because you're pressing, even in situations that maybe you didn't need to, just to get things going, and it doesn't go your way. And to me, that was the way I read that. I mean, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are a very, very good defense, and I think despite their recent troubles, a pretty damn good team. I mean, they should have won that game against Montreal 2 weeks ago, but they didn't, much to the delight of all of us here in Manitoba. But it's going to take a full, complete effort. The defense is going to need to continue to play at that level that they're at, because as pedestrian as they looked at times against Toronto last week, you saw what they did to the Montreal defense offensively, led by Trevor Harris, and that was a problem. But to me, it comes back to Bomber football. Play great defense. Play solid special teams. Don't turn the football over. Run the ball with Brady Oliveira. Everything else should come into it. You just can't be allowing the other teams back in with freebies and turnovers. And I think ball security and taking care of that, I really do think it probably comes down to being quite a field position game. And I'll tell you what, if this game is close, maybe Corey Mace learned some really, really hard lessons last week in the walk-off Rouge game against Toronto. I've got a lot more confidence in Mike O'Shea with his experience behind the bench in big games like this, with all due respect to Mace so far. So we'll see where we go from there. But Zach's got to clean it up a little bit. He'd be the first one to tell you that, and that, I think, is where it starts. But it wouldn't surprise me if he came out and had a huge game on Sunday.
No. I mean, look, let's be realistic. And this is to take nothing away from the Riders, who have been, I would say, much better than a lot of people might have thought this year. If the Bombers have one turnover or less in this game, they're not walking out without a W. Like that's been like maybe the one thing that's kept them from a multiple game lead atop the West Division, is games where it's like, I mean, think of the last game against Saskatchewan, where Nick Dembski basically handed Saskatchewan the win on a silver platter with multiple fumbles, right? If the Bombers avoid that, they're going to be just fine. They would have been just fine against Hamilton too, if that one Collaros INT doesn't sail over Oliveira's head and they pick up even just 3 or 6 on that play. So it's one of those things. And Zach would say, like, I'm not going into these games planning on throwing 2 picks and losing a fumble, right? Like, it's not like this isn't news to anybody that's watched or played football before, but it's just a matter of execution at this point. But I mean, the Bombers are kind of like the way the Patriots were with, Belichick and Brady, where special teams, they're going to win 9 times out of 10. The defense is going to be solid to stout. And if the offense can just get out of their own way, it's going to be tough to beat them on any given Sunday. So I think we will see a much more sharp Bomber offense. The big key for them all year too, the turnovers is one thing, but when the O-line protects Zach and he has time to throw, they put up points. And so Stanley Bryant being back is maybe the biggest good piece of news to go along with the fact that, scary situation, that's kind of in the rear view and he's good to go moving forward.
Yeah, nothing is going to make Zach Collaros more comfortable at Mosaic Stadium than seeing 66 in the huddle and going out there. So first off, and listen, we've seen so far is a strange season for the Bombers considering the bar that they've set the last 4 seasons. They have beaten themselves in a few games this year. You can't do that against a good team like Saskatchewan, which should be an absolutely bananas environment, not a seat to be had at Mosaic Stadium. And as I say, I think there'll be quite a bit of blue there in the stadium as well. Brandon, so we had that huge trade last week and sort of got into it. I was just mentioning to Connor off the top, the McGroarty for Yeager trade is one of the most interesting deals we've had in the NHL in a long time. And now that we've had a few days to sort of digest it, as well as hear from Craig Button and Grant McCagg and people from, around the scouting world as well, I find it even more interesting in that the different perspectives on this trade from different people. And it just speaks again to the nature of prospects, drafting people at 18. And we really don't know until we know, which frankly takes 4 or 5 years. And I mean, our conversations comparing these two players probably won't stop at any point in the next half decade or so. But I am interested in just, kind of what you've gathered from around the hockey world. And now that we've had a little bit more time to digest it since last week, where you're at it on how the Jets made out considering the situation that they were put in.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did just fine. I mean, one of the, I think, main goals when they were thinking about moving Rewucki McGroarty, and especially if it was going to be for like a younger asset, would be to essentially take a plus or a surplus of where you're strong in your organization and kind of divvy it up to maybe where you could use a little bit of reinforcement. The Jets at both the big level and in their prospect level were really strong on the wings. And so for them, I think it was important that they get either a center or a defenseman back in a trade for McGroarty, and they were able to, by all accounts, do that with Braden Yeager here. So, I mean, I hate to make the comparison again, but you look at the Cutter Gauthier trade, it's a 5th overall pick for a 6th overall pick in Jamie Drysdale. Then you give McGroarty 14th for Yeager a 14th. So even by historical precedence, it's a fair trade. I do like a slightly little bit more in Winnipeg's favor. I think Pittsburgh is maybe to a small degree, maybe putting more of an emphasis on having an NHL ready guy this year to help their team. But I do think, and like you said, 4 or 5 years from now, when these kids are in their early 20s, I would preferably have Braden Yeager on my team than Rewucki McGroarty. Just talking about strictly on ice stuff there. So I like the way the Jets did it. Again, the best way for the Jets to improve their team seems to be Chevy gets backed into a corner and he's forced into a move. He's 100% on those so far, and he did it again. And it's not to say that I think Pittsburgh lost the trade. I think both sides got what they wanted out of it, but pretty tough for Winnipeg to do much better than getting who I think is going to be a really good second line center for a long time in the NHL.
Brandon, I mean, I can't wait to see Braden Yeager in camp, and whether he can play his way into the conversation at the end of camp, get a few games, I guess will remain to be seen. But you know what is surprising to me? When I see the list, like from the Corey Pronmans of the world, breaking down the Jets' top prospects, the one guy that I don't know, I feel is being really, really undervalued is Elias Salmonson. And I'm not sure whether he just doesn't project to be, a super elite scoring defenseman. But man, I mean, we've talked about the Jets with the depth that they've lost on the right side. There's a lot of these exciting forward prospects coming up. I would make an argument that Elias is as important a prospect coming into the organization this year as just about anybody else in the organization because of what he could potentially do and how important that role is of a solid middle six right shot defenseman that, has been playing against men and excelling for the last number of years in Europe. What are your thoughts on Elias coming into camp and his projections for this year, but also just the importance of him becoming an NHLer and seeing his potential for how the Jet blue line will look in the future?
Yeah, I think when you talk about the prospects on this team, it's fair to say that the guy with the most likelihood to make the roster out of training camp is going to be Brad Lambert. He's got a little bit more seniority on some of the other guys, but his production in the AHL, pretty hard to ignore. I think he'd be everybody's pick to make the big club this year and to make the jump. I think Salomonson's right behind him, man. I totally agree that I think a lot of people are sleeping on him, and I don't totally know why. Maybe it's because there's not an element of dynamism in his game. He's not going to look like Cale Makar out there. Maybe he's not as big as a Victor Hedman or something like that. But to me, he reminds me a lot of Matthias Ekholm, who's had himself a pretty damn good career. I think that would be easily best case scenario for the Jets there. But yeah, he just checks off all the boxes for me. And even when he was at the World Juniors, obviously you would like the recklessness to be toned down a little bit, but you watch him throw the body out there and you're like, this kid's going to be a problem really soon. So I'm pretty high on him. I think he's going to be in the top 4 sooner than later for Winnipeg. And I do wonder, Chevy he's not going to reveal his cards or anything like that, but I do wonder if the team keeping Neil Pionk for this season is maybe in any way tipping their hand to they think Salamonson might be ready for a second pair role on the right side next year. I wonder about that. But if you want to do prospect rankings, Huss, I mean, for me, it's Lambert 1, and I would have a tough argument not to put Salamonson at number 2. I really do think there's a chance that he plays a handful of NHL games this year and makes a big-time name for himself at the AHL level in the process.
Yeah, I'm with you. And listen, I'm sort of resigned to the fact that he in all likelihood starts with the Moose. But I really think he finds himself in maybe a little bit of a different position than, for even Ville Heinola for the last couple of years, just because of the turnover and the fact that, it doesn't take much to kind of project ahead and see Elias potentially in that position next season, as you just mentioned. And if that's the case, I think I would be shocked if he doesn't get 12, 15, 20 games this year in the National Hockey League. And it's probably happening later on. And listen, it's going to be up to him. You come in, have yourself a great training camp, show that you're kind of ready right now. And even if you go back to the Moose and play 2 or 3 months, probably in reality, probably a good thing for him to get used to the North American game, having played over in Sweden, with just the differences and just getting accustomed to Winnipeg and the organization. But I mean, I'm buying Elias Salomonsson, and I think that he could be a factor, could potentially be in the lineup playing by the end of the year, which would be a really, really interesting development. And then wouldn't that be something going into next year with Elias Salomonsson, Ville Heinola, presumably Stanley still very much so in the mix, that kind of next class of Winnipeg Jet defensemen moving in and trying to make an impact. And, and we'll see if that can take this group to another level, although we do realize that there is some experience and sometimes some tough lessons learned by younger defensemen when they first get to the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting, you didn't pose the question, but what are the chances of Heinola Salomonsson being the second pairing next season? I mean, it's there for Ville, though. You know what I mean? Like, if he comes out, and even though he's maybe not written in pen for that number 3, the third pair left-hand side spot, like it should be his after training camp. If he lights it up this year, I mean, why not give that a shot, right? To have the ability to potentially find a second pair replacement in-house instead of having to spend a first-round pick or a high-end prospect to get somebody like that. Be a tidy way of business knowing you have Josh Morrissey ahead of you. So it's exciting. I don't know what the likelihood of that happening is. I'll be honest, though. I have more belief in Salomonsson being that guy than Ville Heinola does, but it would be nice to get an answer one way or the other on Heinola's NHL profile by the time this season comes to an end. So I think either way, it's pretty exciting on the blue line for the Winnipeg organization as a whole. And I think, hey, go play 25 minutes a night. If you're Salomonsson in the AHL for 2-3 months, that's great. Like it's not a bad thing, even if he does come close, maybe pushing guys at training camp. And then if it's become apparent that he's just like, we got a gem on our hands and we can't hold him back much longer, then you can have that discussion sometime in 2025. But I think especially for defensemen, it's great. And I think it helped Brad Lambert a lot too, Huss, where, he got a chance at center. He played all situations. And I don't envision a scenario where he's not playing some kind of significant minutes with the Jets this season, because they kind of not slow burned him necessarily, but just, instead of getting a cup of coffee here or there, let's throw you in down with the Moose and you get 20 plus minutes a night. I think the most important thing is always just for any prospect of any age at any stage of their development is just play a number 2 ton of minutes. And that's what Lambert's done, and that's what Salamonsen's going to do for the first half of the season. And then it's up to them to decide, or at least to force a decision on Jets management as to where they play after that.
Well, and one other thing, and listen, I'm certainly not wishing ill will on anyone. I will just point out that it has been almost strange at how healthy the Jet defense core has been for the majority of the last few regular seasons. And if the law of averages work out, this year, like at a certain point, guys do get hurt, although it hasn't happened very much on the Jet blue line. I mean, that could be the opening where, listen, much like Josh Morrissey came in, took advantage of an injury and never looked back, that one of these young players gets a chance to show what they can do. Hey, quickly before we leave, have you looked at the Flyers schedule yet? Do you know when Anaheim is coming into to Philly this year? Is that one circled on the calendar?
Oh, I know. That one was circled the second the schedule came out. It's sometime in the new year. I'm pretty sure it's January, sometime in like mid-January. But yeah, no, don't worry. That's the most anticipated Flyer game of the year for sure.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what's going to be crazier. Philly, when Connor Hrabchak comes in, or the fifth game of the season here in Winnipeg when the Pittsburgh Penguins come to the Peg. I mean, I think we're talking about 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Those could be two of the most ramped up crowds in the entire National Hockey League this year. Not doing everything but rolling out a warm welcome to a particular rookie on the other team.
It's going to be amazing. Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. That's the number one game on the Jets schedule. Like if you're doing the draft with the home tickets, you want that Pittsburgh one early on. No doubt about it. The only difference I'll make between the two is that I think there's a legitimate chance, Huss. Remember that fan that tried to fight Ty Domi a few years back in Philly? We might see that happen. That we might get 2.0. That won't happen at Winnipeg. I cannot say with certainty that it's not going to happen. Philly fans are beyond pissed at the Gauthier thing. Maybe because, I mean, I guess to be fair, a little more high profile of a prospect, right? Like he was coming in to be like a number one center for them. McGroarty would be more like second line, middle six winger type thing. Yeah. So I mean, it's Philadelphia, so pissed that kind of goes, second hand. That's the nature of the beast that we're talking about there. But I'm intrigued. I think we're gonna get the chant. Like we haven't had a great chant in Winnipeg in a long time. That's what I'm kind of looking forward to the most, is that we get on McGroarty and the Pens there. And I don't have high hopes for Pittsburgh this year either. So it can be one of those, very winnable games for the Jets. And then there's got to be some kind of a message sent by somebody on Winnipeg to the young cat if he makes the Pittsburgh lineup this year. So I'm excited.
You know what? I guarantee you that message will be coming from everybody packing Canada Life Center for that tilt as well. Brandon, listen, great stuff. I know you got to run. Have an awesome long weekend. Can't wait to talk to you next week as get ready for NFL kickoff and then Jet training camp just around the corner.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, enjoy your long weekend as well. Go Blue. We'll talk next week.
Appreciate it. Folks, check out Skates and Plates wherever you get your favorite podcasts. That was Brandon Rewucki. Ken Wiebe coming up next on the program before he hits the road for a little bit before a long, busy hockey season. Of course, we're talking lots of Bombers today. All of our Bomber reports brought to you by our friends at Princess Auto, founded and headquartered right here in Winnipeg. And of course, the home of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers is Princess Auto Stadium. If you're lucky enough to have a ticket for the Banjo Bowl, get to that Princess Auto tailgate zone early. It will be absolutely bananas. And of course, for the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around, everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new, get to Princess Auto, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Shout out to our friends at Canadian Club. We'll be bringing a few CC and Gingers on the road with us to Regina on the weekend. Of course, Canadian Club, proud sponsor of the Bombers, the official spirit of the blue and gold, available throughout Princess Auto Stadium on game days. And of course, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, along with all of the Canadian Club family of products at your local Manitoba liquor marts, along with CC and Ginger pre-mixed in cocktails, which you can also pick up on your next trip to grab beer at your local vendor. Wallace & Wallace are the leaders in fencing and overhead doors in the city, and they've been doing it for over 70 years, since 1946 here in the Peg. You've seen their fences and trucks all over the city. If you need the security and protection of a new fence, they have you covered with vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And if you need a new garage door, they've got Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. Is the exclusive Clopay dealer in Manitoba. 204-452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Crescent off of Kenaston. And just before we bring in Ken Wiebe, you want to look great like Ken and all the other media up in the press box every day, head on down to F Apparel, guys. Best deals on custom clothing for men, including custom suits starting at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. 15% discount for wedding parties. So if you're getting married or in a wedding party, make sure to talk to the fellas at F about a great deal when the fellas get their suits at F for the big day. 190 Smith Street downtown. You can make an appointment at F Apparel. That's EPHapparel.com. All right, this is great. And we're using a little different system here. I didn't realize Ken had been warming his rubber arm up in the bullpen as long as he is, but let's get the big guy in here before he hits the road tomorrow overseas. Are you getting excited, Ken?
Andrew, you know I'm always excited. Vacation always welcome, no doubt about that. I've never been to Italy, so it's a bucket list trip for me, and can't wait.
Have you ever been overseas?
See the sights. Global Series for Patrick Laine in Finland, Huss, and then I spent 4 days in Barcelona at the end of that trip. But otherwise, that's my other than a couple of touchdowns in airports and a trip, I guess, to Dubai. Trip to where? Qatar. Sorry, I was in Qatar also. I guess that would count as overseas.
You and I have both been to Qatar. That is bizarre. What the hell were you doing in Qatar?
Not a lot of people would have that on the bingo card, Andrew. No doubt about that. 1999, my college girlfriend's folks were working down in Qatar, and it was quite a scene. Spent almost 3 weeks there. Just around Christmas time and New Year's of 1999. So
how did I not know this going to the World Cup? I didn't get any Qatar tips from Weebe's World.
I know, Huss. When we thought the world might be coming to an end in 1999, we were at the top of a sand dune in Qatar, in Doha. So it was a pretty cool visit for sure.
We were like, listen, get to it. I kind of want to talk about some Jets topics with you, but it's Labor Day weekend coming up. Bombers and Riders on Sunday afternoon. Have got to ask you what you, well, first of all, just thoughts on the Bomber. The fact that they're even able to win this game and be in first place, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around based on what happened this far. They had a close call last week, but, Zach bailed himself and the team out late in the game. What do you make of this matchup, especially with the great news this week? Stanley Bryan expected to play, Big Hill back at practice, and Drew Wolodarski. But nothing easy when you go on the road on Labor Day, and the same thing coming back here for the Banjo Bowl.
Yeah, Huss, as much as I'm excited about my vacation, it's very reminiscent here. As you know, I attended the University of Regina, and the first sign of being back at school was making the pilgrimage from Altona to Regina, down the old number one, and getting there in time for try to get there in time Saturday so you could go to the game on Sunday. So first of all, congrats to you for getting that bus filled up. And I know it'll be a rowdy and raucous atmosphere down Broad Street on the day before the game, and also obviously at Mosaic, which is also sold out. Huss, as you mentioned, the great Bombers attendance this season. Again, it's been down a bit in Ryderville, but they're sold out thanks in part to some Winnipeg folks and Manitobans making their way over to Regina as well. It should be fantastic. Huss, I mean, I just covered a few Bomber practices this year, but Zach Collaros is going to be motivated. He's motivated every week to have a good week, but he's definitely looked inward a lot this year, and it was his first to say he needs to be better in a lot of areas. And he says that after a 5-touchdown game also, but I would imagine that after a 3-pick game, this is an experienced team, Huss. We talked about this all year long after the slow start. They know the importance of getting at least a split in these 2 games, and if somehow they can sweep the home and home, they put themselves in such an excellent position in terms of the standings in the West. We know BC has had some struggles lately, despite Nathan Rourke coming back. The Riders are, tough way to end it last week on the Rouge, which has prompted a lot of discussion. I know you'll be getting into that with Hammer on CFL 110, but marquee matchup on the schedule for the folks in the Prairies. It'll be a fantastic atmosphere. And Huss, as we know, it doesn't matter if one of the teams is 10-0 and the other team is 0-10. This is a great battle. It's going to be enthusiastic. Both teams know what is at stake, and I would expect the best efforts from both clubs, knowing that there have been a couple of hiccups, let's just say, over the last couple of weeks, even though Winnipeg has done a great job of overcoming some of those hiccups and getting their season back on track.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think what happened last week with the 3 picks and then bailing himself and the team out the way, I think it just will steel Zach for what's to come in Mosaic. And maybe that's definitely my glass half full side of me, but we've seen this team do it before.
It's the beauty of Zach too, Huss, right? I mean, that's the thing. He had so many kind of computer-like seasons where the picks were way down and the touchdowns were way up that I think fans just came to expect perfection essentially from him. So the fact that there have been, again, we know that Father Time is undefeated, but we also know that the beauty of Zach is that his experience kind of allows him to park those off days and 2 or 3 pick outings, and still allows him to sort of drive the length of the field and find his favorite receiver who has been missing for much of the year due to injury, and find a way to get the job done when it matters. And that's part of. We talked about this a lot, Huss. I mean, even though there's been a youth movement at some positions, including receiver this year, having that stabilizing factor at quarterback is something that the Blue Bombers are pretty thankful for, even with some of the outings that have not been quite Collaros-like, like you've talked about throughout the course of the week here.
Yeah, well, listen, it's going to be a hell of a weekend. Cannot wait for it. Looking forward to the rematch here. And then after the Banjo Bowl, certainly, I mean, more big games for the Blue Bombers, but back to work for all of us on the hockey beat as the Winnipeg Jets will be getting going for training camp. If you pop by late, by the way, FanFest tickets are available now. They're free, but you got to get them because there is limited capacity. Go to the Jets website, and that's going to be quite the day. FanFest in the morning at the Hockey for All Center, and then the first preseason game that night down at Canada Life Center in downtown Winnipeg. Ken Wiebe with us. Kenny, I know you've been spending quite a bit of time since the Yager-McGroarty trade talking with people around the league, scouts. I found it so interesting as to, I think everyone agrees that both of these young men are very, very good NHL prospects, but the different perspective on both of the players from people that have covered them for a long time, how the Jets made out, how the others, I think the bottom line is we're not really going to be able to have this discussion legitimately for 4 or 5 years until we see what the finished products is as NHLers. But man, it sparked a lot of discussion around the league on how the Jets ended out, and both Yager and McGroarty as prospects. What have you been hearing from around the league during, your continued quest for everything about the Winnipeg Jets?
For answers, continued quest for answers. Well, certainly some folks around the Tamarack last week in Clear Lake, Huss, were quite familiar with Braden Yager, the player. Lots of WHL, or folks that are interested in the WHL, lots that have seen him. Some folks have scouted him. And just in calls that I've made around the league, this is a guy who's very well regarded in terms of his 200-foot game, high character guy. And Huss, I have to tell you, I mean, I listened to the interview with you on the show, and I mean, what a great, well-spoken, humble young man. That's something that I heard a lot going, in the last, in the days after the trade, after you and I spoke. And this is a guy who knows what it's like to play on the prairies. He comes from a small market team in the Western Hockey League. a team that he helped win the Western Hockey League championship and advance to the Memorial Cup. Got some great insight from Jason Bukala for folks who may have missed it on the Kenny and Rennie show this week. He provided some great insight from his viewings over the years, with the World Juniors and in the Memorial Cup itself. I kind of ran out of gas a little bit in Jason's opinion at the end of the year, but that's because this guy played over 100 plus games last year. When you tally it all up, Huss, I love the discussion that you had with him regarding Sidney Crosby and how he was taking notes and how he would be applying those notes in his second NHL training camp this time around. Again, we know it was a difficult scenario for the Winnipeg Jets, for Kevin Cheveldayoff. The fact that they got resolution now, I think, helps them. There'll be a little bit more of a buzz. I think some folks, from the province over who will be wearing green this weekend, I think there'll be a boost in jersey sales with Nate or with blue, red, and white on them over the course of the year itself as well. So, again, much like we talked about last week. I mean, this was a very smart addition by the Winnipeg Jets. Now we know Kyle Dubas spoke very highly of Brayden Yager as well. We know that this is a team in Pittsburgh. They're a little bit more in win now mode. Not that the Jets aren't, but with a captain in Sidney Crosby that's 37 years old and an aging Evgeny Malkin, they were looking for a little bit more of an advanced player in terms of both age and maybe experience. But Huss, I mean, you also talked about it over the course of the week. I loved the attitude that Brayden Yager had, and he certainly is coming. He's coming to training camp to stick around longer than just getting himself a little bit of a taste of what it's like in Winnipeg before he goes back to junior. And again, we hear this from players all the time when they're drafted, but to me, he's taking the perfect approach. Now, will Brayden Yager stay beyond 9 games? Will he even get 1 game? Well, we have no idea, but I love the fact that he is preparing himself to be here beyond just training camp and making the decision as difficult as humanly possible. In terms of McGroarty, he signed his ELC right away. He's hopeful to make the roster. We know the Penguins probably have a little bit more room in the wing in that middle 6 role for him than he might have had here. But again, let's let the players decide. Lots of people, like you said, we won't know for 4 or 5 years, but that won't prevent us and many others from discussing it. And that's part of the beauty of the sport. But we're not going to be able to, to say, hey, that team got the better of them and that team got the better of them. I mean, depends which glasses that you're looking for. But the beauty is that both players look to be, players of impact, sooner rather than later with their respective organizations. And, that's what all teams are looking for, a trade that benefits both teams. And we'll see who gets the greater benefit over the long haul here.
By the way, you mentioned your pop-up there, folks. If you weren't with us on Monday, Ken and Sean went live afterwards. Great listen. And I really enjoyed the talking with Jason Bukala, who, gave some real good insight into both of the players. If you can't get enough analysis of this trade, definitely get over with those guys. And I will give a shout out to Rennie. He mentioned the passing of his dog. That was a heavy moment at the end of the program there. We know how, much that can affect people. So giving a shout out to Sean. We'll lean on Sean to fill your rather large shoes while you're in Edmonton but in Italy, Italy, Edmonton, same thing. When he joins us, we'll get him on the show over the next couple of weeks.
Beautiful.
One of the other things that you might want to check out, considering what I'm about to talk to Ken about, is the deep dive at Winnipeg Sports Talk. Connor Hrabchak and Liz have done a great job with a couple of them. There's going to be one coming out in the near future on Brayden Yager, which you can look forward to. But the first one they did was on Colby Barlow. And it's funny, Ken, we've talked so much about Elias Salmonson coming over. Is Brad Lambert going to be able to make the team?
Yep.
Billy Hainela. We have not actually talked a lot about Colby Barlow. And listen, before I get to what I kind of want to discuss, just your thoughts on Barlow coming into his second NHL camp. What do you think his prospects are for training camp and for the upcoming season, knowing that, like Brayden Yager, it's NHL or junior hockey?
Yeah, and for folks who haven't necessarily seen the stories coming out of Owen Sound, Colby will not be reporting to attack training camp here as a lot of the junior teams are getting going. He's going to remain back in Toronto with his pro-style training group in order to continue his preparations for Winnipeg Jets training camp. So, interpret that as you will. Certainly, I read the story, and Dale DeGray, a little bit, the general manager of the Attack, a little bit disappointed. But he's starting to say this is not just a Colby Barlow thing. This is something where a lot of players at that 19-year-old age group, you used to go to your junior camp to get yourself ready for camp, but they see more value right now, or some people do, in training with the pro guys, with the NHL guys, in order to help your preparations for the NHL camps that are also, just around the corner here in roughly 3 weeks' time. So certainly that I wanted to start there. But in terms of Barlow, Huss, I love the long-term potential of Braden Yeager and Colby Barlow sort of, becoming a pairing, if you will, or line mates. I mean, again, we'll have to see what the chemistry is like, but to me, these are two guys that, could be real. I know there's different lists and different speculation about the World Junior, but I could easily see these two guys playing on a line together at the World Junior. Now, in terms of Colby's NHL prospects for this season, to me, it's interesting. I mean, that could dovetail into another topic that obviously we'd be getting into, but there doesn't seem to be a spot available for Colby in the top 6 right now. So it'll be tough for him to make the team. But I mean, much like Braden Yeager, Colby's a guy who's worked on his 200-foot game. So could there be a potential for him to maybe spend some time lower down in the lineup? Yes, that's a possibility. And then the other thing we have to, keep under consideration, Huss, is if the stalemate between the Winnipeg Jets and Cole Perfetti drags into training camp, well, maybe then there is the potential for a top 6 job to be available, whether that's for Colby Barlow, Braden Yeager, or Brad Lambert, or some combination of the 3 of those people. Now, again, I've said this from the very beginning. I don't expect that to be the case. I expect the Jets and Cole Perfetti to get a bridge deal done at some point, sooner rather than later. Is it necessarily going to be before a camp? I'm not sure. I think both sides definitely want that to be the case. But again, that I would say it would take an incredible camp for Barlow to have a chance to break camp with the Jets. And Huss, the one thing we have to remember about Colby Barlow, whereas Braden Yeager actually spent the entire training camp with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Colby Barlow unfortunately got sick on the Friday, day 2 of the actual, or day 1 of the on-ice skates. The announcement came at 3:30 in the afternoon that he had signed his ELC. The next day he was sick, and he basically didn't get back on the ice with the main group for the rest of the entire camp. So even though, yes, Colby Barlow, is a little bit more advanced than the 2024 draft picks, he basically didn't get any real participation, no preseason games, and very limited reps with the NHL group, if you will. So yes, it is technically his second camp, but in a lot of ways, Huss, it's really his first NHL training camp when it talks to being a full participant. So again, that's not to say that would hold him back in terms of trying to, win a job out of camp. It just means that he's got a few other things to sort himself through and before he's able to kind of turn some heads the way that maybe Mark Scheifele did, back in 2011, if you will. But I mean, again, I do expect Colby Barlow to show well in the preseason, Huss. And what we know about Barlow is he can really shoot the puck and he can score. So, I mean, we know that Scott Arniel has discussed the importance of adding more offense and, more, another weapon on the power play. So those are 2 tools that Colby Barlow has in the toolbox. But it's just a reminder that, like, Huss, let's not forget how many guys on the Jets were double-digit goal scorers last year. So yes, he is a highly touted prospect. And yes, I do think he'll be on the Jets in the next couple of seasons. But he's going to have to leapfrog guys that are double-digit NHL players, not just NHL-ready players, fully established NHL players who are double-digit goal scorers. So, I mean, to me, Colby Barlow is a guy that's going to, score 20 with relative ease in short order, but I'm not sure that he's ready for that quite yet. But, I mean, again, Colby may have other ideas, and like I talked about, some of the projections from the guys who are, prospect, gurus, if you will, they don't have Barlow on the World Junior team based on the summer camp. So you can be darn sure that Colby Barlow is going to try to change the minds of many of those folks, and more importantly, the coaching staff who will be making those final decisions in December.
Well, and listen, I mean, I don't want to pretend to go all insider or anything, but this article that, you know, I was reading earlier about his situation with Owen Sound was interesting, because I did hear some rumblings in Vegas at the draft that, you know, the last couple of years have been sort of rough on him. I mean, he was great that he was the youngest captain in the OHL. Yeah. The team has stunk. They've gotten swept out of the playoffs in the last 2 years. In the first round,
crazy coaching change,
coaching change for sure. And when I saw this, I could not help but think that maybe there's some things going on behind the scenes, at least if in the likelihood that he's returned to the Ontario Hockey League, that he is looking for a change of scenery. Now, I mean, Dale DeGray, who is the GM, has sort of done like kind of a public, I don't know, I read it as almost like a public plea to Colby to come back. They said, hey, we support him. We're disappointed he's not here with the team right now, but we get it. And he's a top prospect, so that's the way it is. But it almost seems like they're sort of trying to make a bridge to get him back to it. I mean, listen, he had 40 goals in 50 games last year. But beyond Colby Barlow, there's not a lot there right now. And you know, I do wonder how influential the National Hockey League parent club of a player like Colby Barlow could be in potentially maybe getting him, knowing that the Moose in the AHL is not an option because of the CHL-NHL agreement, maybe getting into a situation, if he is going back to the Ontario Hockey League, where he's in a position to play on a more competitive team, to win some more games, and just in the short term, to your point, put him in his position to maybe show a little bit better, to be in the mix for that team come Christmas time.
Yeah, I mean, I won't be surprised if Colby Barlow is eventually moved to you know, maybe more of an OHL powerhouse. You know, again, I don't know the rosters well enough to know if it's a Kitchener Rangers or a London Knights, or, you know, who's a real powerhouse on the other side of things. But yeah, I mean, Colby's spoken very highly of his experience in Owen Sound, and yes, I mean, it was great for him to carry the load and to show his leadership skills and ability as a 17-year-old and 18-year-old captain. But, you know, if he's not going to be in the NHL, it's more important for his development, you know, to be on a, you know, bona fide contender rather than maybe a team that's going to be, you know, below average or whatever they're projected to be here. So, yeah, I mean, again, who knows? And again, Dale didn't want to speculate, or he wouldn't want to. He didn't answer specifics about whether or not the Barlow camp has asked for a deal. But I'd be surprised if he's back for a full season with the Owen Sound Attack, if he is eventually reassigned by the Jets to the OHL.
Do you know?
But,
I mean,
again,
like
stranger things have happened.
Normally, Ken, like, how much influence can an NHL team have
Yeah.
on a junior team in a situation like this? Like, listen, this is their guy. He's their top scorer. He's their captain. They obviously don't want him to go. It's a youthful team with low expectations this year.
Right.
He certainly seems like the guy you'd want to have in the room helping those young players. From a player standpoint, though, he's probably best suited elsewhere, and I'd say the Jets would probably agree. How much can the NHL team do, or is that really sort of something that you have to hope you've got a good relationship and make things happen, but there's not really much they can?
Yeah, I mean, Huss, I would say this. I mean, the lines of communication would be open with Dale DeGray and Kevin Cheveldayoff, but I mean, again, I don't know that Kevin Cheveldayoff's trying to strong arm Dale DeGray into making a move. I mean, Kevin's background himself is from playing in the Canadian Hockey League with the Brandon Wheat Kings, so we all know how those things go. But I just think the other part of that too. I think, to me, it's more DeGray not wanting to be forced into doing something unless it's valuable for the organization. But plus, we know this: Colby Barlow will not be back for his 20-year-old year with the Owen Sound Attack, and if you're not a bona fide contender, he's their best bargaining chip in order to restock the shelves. So Dale DeGray already knows that it's in the best interest of the Attack to trade Colby Barlow for future assets. Now, whether that happens in October or closer to the deadline, I mean, that's up for him to decide. I don't think that Kevin Cheveldayoff would be, constantly calling and trying to force the hand of the Owen Sound Attack. Now, would the Jets make it clear that they'd like a better situation? Maybe, but I would even say that that's already that would fall more into the the agent category than the NHL parent club. But again, lines of communication would always be open. But I think there will be resolution. I don't think that this is going to be something where Colby's sitting out and practicing rather than playing in the Ontario Hockey League. I don't see that scenario kind of playing itself out under any circumstances, essentially.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, listen, if he's got any hopes of sort of upping his stock with Hockey Canada and being on that team, 100%. I mean, has to be playing well, making an impact, making a difference, and being in the mix for that camp, and hopefully hearing his name called and being able to represent Team Canada. Jaeger played on it last year as an underager. I've heard rumblings that he might be even in the mix for wearing the C this year. You hearing anything on that?
Yeah, certainly I've seen the talk about him wearing a letter for sure. And again, it's usually a returnee. I mean, I didn't follow that team closely enough. I know that they've got a number of returnees, and let's not forget. I mean, Colby Barlow had that injury last year. I think it was a back or a shoulder issue, and we thought that he would be in the mix last year, but he missed so much time going into the World Junior that he'd never really had a fair chance for him to show his capabilities. So otherwise, that's why I say it's such the projections. Again, I respect the work that those guys are doing. These guys are watching those guys all the time, but it's important to remember that these lists change, and you can't predict what's going to happen in August compared to December. There's injuries, there's all kinds of other things, and again, this is not a knock on the player, but Huss, last summer we all anticipated, and the projections were that Dom DiVincentis would not only be on Team Canada but the starting goalie, and he didn't end up getting to go because he had a tough start to the year. Now, I had a great talk about that with Dom at development camp, and now he's ready to start his pro journey. But this is just a reminder that sometimes the projections are only worth the paper that they the players have capabilities in the time of it. And although those camps are only a small portion of the decision-making process, and that's why I still think that Colby has a great chance at being on that World Junior team come December.
Ken, as we get closer to exhibition games and at the start of the season, we'll have further conversations about the landscape of the Central Division overall. But I have to ask you about the Askarov trade and just how that all came about, and what that says about where Nashville is right now and moving forward, considering the large bag of cash that Barry Trotz rolled out on the 1st of July.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we had also heard too. I mean, Askarov and his camp had asked for a move, and we'd heard projections for a long time, Huss, about, could Askarov be the kind of guy that could allow the Predators to get their hands on a scorer like Marty Necas, who, again, was back in the news this week in 32 Thoughts with Elliott confirming that the Jets were one of the teams, along with the Columbus Blue Jackets, that had shown serious interest in acquiring the player. So I have to say this, Huss, I was a little bit surprised in the landing spot for Askarov, and I enjoyed watching him a couple times with the Milwaukee Admirals. I think I watched one of the playoff games a couple of years ago with the Manitoba Moose, and this is a guy who's NHL ready. And Huss, just on the flip side, for Askarov, I mean, what better spot for him to go to in terms of playing time and opportunity? He basically was in a spot where he was buried behind UC Saros, and then the backup in Scott Wedgwood. And again, I'm not saying he's going to be the bona fide number one right away, but in terms of clearest path to the starting job, it's hard to identify a better situation in the National Hockey League for him to eventually become the starting goalie, whether that's next year or maybe even potentially before the season is over. With all due respect to, I think Mackenzie Blackwood is still under contract, Huss, I believe there. But either way, a great setup for them. So I was curious about the return. For me, it didn't necessarily fill the immediate void that we thought it would in some of the previous discussions. But I still think it's a smart move by Barry Trotz. He didn't want to have the distraction kind of hanging over things either, much like the Jets didn't want the distraction of Rutger McGroarty's future impacting their training camp. But again, I think the Predators did some great work. Barry Trotz did some excellent work, even just keeping a guy like Alexandre Carrier. I mean, a guy that we know the Jets had significant interest in, dating back to the trade deadline, and obviously, if he had gotten to be, stuck around beyond free agency, I think that was a guy that they would have enjoyed bolstering the right hand side with if they could get him to stick around, if they could have lured him rather than sticking around.
Yeah, no, it is a great point, Ken. Listen, you have a wonderful trip to Italy.
One. Yeah, thank you, my man. Just I caught the end of the discussion with Brandon, and I just want to raise a different possibility. I don't see a scenario where Solomonson Heinola leapfrogs Dylan Samberg by next year, but what I do want to raise, what about the prospect of Heinola playing alongside Dylan Samberg at some point this year? Again, depending on how Pionk plays and all those things, I think it's much more likely that scenario could unfold than the one that maybe Brandon was projecting. And again, Huss, I'm right there with you when it comes to Solomonson and his long-range future with the Jets. I think this is a guy that could be Josh Morrissey's partner within, whether it's 2 years or 2 seasons, we'll see. But I just think that maybe accidentally the value of Dylan Samberg was maybe being undercut in that scenario that was being raised. And, again, I think Solomonson Samberg could be the shutdown pairing by next year, but I also could see a scenario where you could see, Heinola getting some time there on this year on that pairing, depending on how things play out. And I mean, that's the beauty of what this is looking at. And I even think too, Dylan Coughlin is a guy that I don't know that we're talking enough about. This is a guy who, right now he's the next Kyle Capobianco, if you will. But I think this is a guy who's highly motivated to work himself into the mix before long as well, when it comes to maybe those 6, 7, 8 slots who we expect to be held by some combination of Colin Miller, Ville Heinola, and Logan Stanley. But I think that the depth chart will expand to include Coughlin. And then Solomonson will have to sort of work his way, sort of shimmy his way in around those scenarios after spending some time with the Manitoba Moose playing those heavy minutes. Because I'm with you 100%. Solomonson, high-end prospect. I think he's underrated by almost every scouting list that we've seen. But I just think that it's going to take a little bit of time to adjust to that North American game, just because of the edge that he plays with. I think just getting used to the North American style and the North American ice is going to be somewhere where he's going to maybe need a little bit of a extended runway. But boy, I've got high hopes for this guy.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting year for Solomonson. And listen, we'll be all over that. I mean, a really interesting battle in training camp coming up. Have a great time in Italy, man. We will look forward to seeing you when you get back. There's Ken Wiebe. Wish him well, everybody in the chat. We're going to talk some fantasy football
as well.
Hey, big draft coming up. And that's why we've got the coach, Gene Clemons, joining us in just a second. First, a big cheers to our friends at Little Brown Jug.
You train day in and day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Yeah, we're going to need to bring some of the good stuff out to Saskatchewan on the weekend for the Bomber Rider Labor Day Classic. If you are staying in town this weekend, though, think about getting ready for the Labor Day game at the Beer Can on Sunday. A great outdoor boxing event beginning at 2 p.m. I'm throwing the link in the chat right now for tickets. It starts at 2 p.m. There's 8 fights, and it's all in support of the Pan Am Place and the Pan Am Boxing Club from the Beer Can. We had Harry Black on the show yesterday. I mean, that institution in the city is incredible for boxing in the city, but also helping upwards of 20 individuals that would otherwise be homeless get on their feet, use boxing to instill confidence in them and grow. and it's all in support of that. So the beer can on Sunday, 2 p.m. Tickets are $25. It is all in support of the Pan Am Place. Would love to see you out there. If you're not in Regina, get out there, support a great cause, have a great time at an amazing venue for some outdoor boxing, and all in support of Pan Am Place. And again, that is at the beer can. Shout out to the beer can next door. And of course, Hoagie Boys for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Just before we bring in Gene Clemons, hockey season is here. We just talked about it. Training camp coming up. You want to get ready to drop the puck this year? Royal Sports is your hockey superstore in Winnipeg for over 40 years. Whether you got a 5 or 6-year-old starting the game or you're back at it for your 50th season, everything you need to drop the puck is at Royal Sports with the biggest and best selection in town. Great prices as well. Not to mention bomber gear for the Labor Day game and Banjo Bowl and all the new NFL merch. 750 Pembina Highway. And of course, you can follow them on Insta at Royal Sports Winnipeg for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And big thanks to our friends at Boston Pizza. We've got a draft tonight. Thinking on getting together at BP for that. Firing up the computers on the Wi-Fi. A few ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, some gourmet pizzas. Nowhere better to be for that. And hey, if you are staying in town for the Labor Day game, get your gang together at Boston Pizza and do it in a crowd. Of course, you can always order BP by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we continue Fantasy Football Week. Really excited to welcome in from the amazing fantasy team at The Athletic, the coach, Gene Clemons, for his WST debut. Gene, what's going on? Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. I've always been a big fan of Canadian football, so if we want to talk a little bit Trey Ford here, I'm all for it. That's my guy. I've been riding for him and really love that. Sorry,
it's funny you bring up Trey Ford because we'll tell you here in Winnipeg that he's the second best Ford in the league and in his family because his twin brother might be the best corner in the CFL this year, doing it for our Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Hey, he may actually indeed be one of the best defensive players in the CFL this year, the way he's been playing. A good family friend of mine, the Wilders. So I go back with James Wilder Jr. for a long time and his family. I've just always kind of had a connection with the CFL. I remember when Ricky Williams got suspended from the NFL for smoking the lettuce and ended up in the Canadian League for a year. And I thought that was really awesome as well. So I don't think there's a league that is less patient with quarterbacks than the CFL, which I think is what makes it so like dynamic. You have to be on it. They're going to try to find somebody to get in there for you.
No, there's no doubt about it. And man, we got a big one. I mean, every year, the biggest game of the year, certainly on the prairies here, is Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, the Bombers and the Riders. We got a sold-out tour heading out on Saturday morning for the weekend and then coming back. And it's kind of this 10-day period, honestly, might be my favorite of the year. I mean, April's pretty fun with the hockey playoffs and the Masters and it getting nice out. But I got to tell you, we get to this weekend, we whoop it up for 3 days in Regina. We come back, finish maybe one more fantasy draft. And then we've got NFL Kickoff starting next Thursday with an amazing tee-off game. We raise another banner at Arrowhead and go Chiefs and Ravens. But let me ask you this, Gene, from a fantasy perspective, right off the bat, you mentioned quarterbacks that are under pressure. We've got an incredible class of rookie quarterbacks coming into the league this year, led by Caleb Williams, the first overall pick. From a fantasy football perspective, what are your thoughts on the rookies this year making an impact? And I mean, I know there's dynasty leagues where you might be able to keep guys longer, but I mean, even for this season, who do you think might really make their mark fantasy-wise in their first year in the league of the rookie QB class of 2024?
Well, obviously, Caleb Williams may have been dropped into the most comforting, accommodating spot ever. Never forget that Justin Fields, for as much as people had issue with him, had a good amount of success throwing the ball, and that's what people think his weakness is. So they went out and got 2 more weapons for Caleb Williams to catch. They got him another tight end. They brought in a pass catching or a running back that has the ability to catch out of the backfield and be dynamic. And they added more to the offensive line. So to just drop a rookie in there with the amount of like raw talent that Caleb Williams has, there's no chance for him to bust this year. Like, the only way that he doesn't have a great season is if he gets hurt for a prolonged period of time and he's not able to perform. But if he's out there, he's going to perform well, because how can you not, right? Like, how can you not? Last year, Justin Fields had more out there, and then a bunch of dudes who were 50-50, 40-60 on catching the ball. Even Cole Kmet, who's back this year, kind of iffy on catching the ball sometimes. This year, Caleb Williams has guys with sticky hands all over the field. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to do. I think he has a chance. He has a chance to have a fantastic real football season, but also a really good fantasy football season. But I tell you, the sneaky one for me is Jaden Daniels with Washington, because I just think and you'll appreciate this being a CFL guy. The upside he brings as a rusher, his ability to put the ball in the end zone as a rusher, his ability to hit a home run from anywhere on the field as a rusher is something that Justin Fields had with the Bears, but also brings the dynamic of an offensive coordinator who believes in his skill set and knows how to put him in the best position to be successful. Something I don't believe that the Bears had in place for Justin Fields' run in Chicago. So I'm really excited about those two. After those two, everything is a toss-up. Like, will Drake May play? Will he not play? Will there be another rookie guy who might get a shot to play because of injury? I know that Bo Nix won the job in Denver, but what does that really mean? Like, we've seen the quarterbacks that have been in Denver. What have we seen out of Bo Nix that says he can elevate beyond what those guys were able to do? Russell Wilson had low-key a decent season last year, and everybody acts like he's done, right? So I don't really know if I'm buying into the Bo Nix. We know that, down in Atlanta, they're going with the vet. They're not going to go with the rookie. And so there's rookies around that have a chance to be good, but we may not see them either this year entirely, or we may not see them early in the year, and it might be too late for them to have an effect in a full season-long fantasy. But in single-game fantasy, you definitely want to make sure that you keep an eye on Michael Penix Jr. if he ends up starting in Atlanta.
Yeah, just on Jaden Daniels for a minute, on the betting show that I do, we were talking about his season total of 525 rushing yards. I am hammering the over on that one. I mean, I think that if he plays all 17 games, and again, any season total, the caveat is you got to pray that the guy stays healthy. But I mean, I think we're going to be talking about games where we're looking at these at the box scores afterwards and seeing him going for 70, for 80, 85 yards. And, if he can do that, he will crush that number. And your point about Cliff Kingsbury being there, I think, is very well taken. Creative offensive schemer, knows exactly what he had. This was the guy that he wanted. This offense is going to be built around him. So we'll take it from there. And I think it should be an exciting start to sort of a new look for Washington moving forward, coming out of the Ron Rivera era. As far as some of the other rookies, like, it seems like it's really the rookie wide receiver class that people are really hot for coming in. Who are your favorites of that? It seems Marvin Harrison is the guy, but I got to tell you, the more I look at Neighbors with the Giants, he kind of reminds me of a guy. And listen, I don't want to say he's Tyreek Hill 2.0, but he has numbing speed, incredible dexterity and versatility. And he's a guy that it seems like, I know Brian Dable is going to try to get the football in his hands quite a bit. Just thoughts on Neighbors and Harrison at the top of that list, and maybe some of the other rookies that you think are worth taking a swing at if you are doing a draft in the next couple of days.
Well, I think that obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. went to a place where he's going to be the incumbent wide receiver one with a quarterback who will target him, right? And so that's a blessing. Marvin Harrison, a guy who has all the physical tools and all of the hereditary things that would lead you to believe he's going to be what everybody believes he's going to be. But you're right. There's just something about Malik Neighbors that just makes your eyes go to him on a regular basis. That could be a good and a bad thing, right? Because that means defenders are going to be watching him. Defenders are going to be looking at him. So he has to be prepared for that. Like he's going to command more attention in the NFL than maybe even he commanded in college, because their offense was so wide open it was almost impossible to focus on him. I think the issue with him will come down to, can Daniel Jones complete deep passes on a regular basis? Because if it just becomes throwing short passes, throwing intermediate passes, it's really going to affect his ability to be explosive like Tyreek Hill is. One of the reasons why Hill is because he's able to get beyond the defense, and the quarterback is able to get him the ball in the space that allows him to go and use that speed. So if DJ is able to do that with the Giants, then I think Neighbors will be fine. Will he get the amount of targets that a Marvin Harrison Jr. might get? I don't know, because I don't know if that offense is set up to force feed a wide receiver. The name, and I'm not talking about Rome Odunze, not because he's good, but because he's the one that went to a receiving core with a bunch of like supremely talented people. So he's going to be one of many, which is going to cut into his fantasy value. But Brian Thomas down with the Jacksonville Jaguars, because they let go so many wide receivers, he has an opportunity to elevate up that roster pretty quickly. And he has just an uncanny ability to get open and get beyond people. He's smooth. He's got great hands, and he's dealing with a quarterback that has to have a great 2024. Even though he got all the money in the new contract, that doesn't matter. These quarterbacks are thinking third contract now. They're not just thinking about the bag on the second contract. They're thinking about the astronomical numbers that come on the third contract. And so for a guy like him, who, when you look at his stats, Trevor Lawrence hasn't been any better than Daniel Jones in his career. It's going to be incumbent upon him to have a really good season 2024 to set himself up going down the line towards that next contract. Another guy that I look at and I say, well, it's going to really matter about the quarterback with Thomas, because it's not that he won't get the targets. It's that a lot of stuff with Lawrence, he bails himself out by running. And that's going to get into the way. It's going to cut into what might be a target for Thomas, along with the other receivers. Evan Ingram is a 1,000-yard receiving tight end. That's going to cut into the production of a wide receiver. But I think he's the one that maybe people aren't talking about as much, that has the opportunity to really shoot up and have an impact. Keon Coleman's a name that's also interesting as well, because Coleman is in Buffalo. And one thing about Josh Allen, he's going to rip it deep. And it's great to be able to rip it deep to a guy with the measurables, the ability to catch radius, the ability to jump and go get balls like Keon Coleman can. So I think those guys really have an opportunity to do some great things early, but you always want to temper when you haven't actually seen a rookie do it in a real football game yet. Like a real NFL football game yet.
Coach Gene Clemons is with us. You can check out his work at the Athletic Fantasy. You mentioned the Bills.
And Fantasy Life as well, Andrew. Like, I'm doing a ton of work with Fantasy Life.
Matthew Berry. Well, I did see you and Nando doing the MB Fantasy Life on Sirius XM as well.
Absolutely.
It's a busy time for y'all.
Absolutely. I'm gonna be all over the place. I'll be on the Tuesday LG show on Fantasy Life. I'll be on a Saturday morning college sports betting, and then I'm going to be on the Sunday morning show getting ready for the NFL. So it's a lot of places you're going to find me over at Fantasy Life. I still love my people over at The Athletic, and I still do work there. And then I love my people at Giants Country, where I do a lot of my analyst work for the New York Giants on SI. So a busy time for me, but I would have it no other way, because I love football. I'm actually, when I'm done with you, I'm going to run to my football practice, because I coach high school football as well.
You got to love it, Gene. Well, thanks again for taking the time to jump on with us. You just mentioned Keon Coleman in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Diggs is gone. I am, the more I draft this year, I kind of get the feeling that Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel are being very undervalued. Where are you at on the Buffalo receiving core and the value of those guys who are always available seemingly in the mid-late rounds when you're seeing second and third receivers go off the board from other teams that don't have Josh Allen as their quarterback?
Well, I think it's not just that it's Josh Allen, because we know that Josh Allen has a propensity to turn the ball over. It's the offense. Like, are they all of a sudden going to change their spots and become a run-heavy offense? They've been throwing the ball all over the place since they've had Josh Allen. They've been relying on Josh Allen to essentially be QB1 and running back one. And so, like, unless they're planning an entire shift of philosophy, which I don't believe they are, he's still going to throw the ball to people. And since they got rid of their top 2 wide receivers from last year, who else are they going to throw it to? Right? That's why I think Keon Coleman has an opportunity to be to be effective. But I also think that both Shakir, both of those guys, Shakir and I forgot his name, it just popped out of my head.
Curtis Samuel.
The guy you just mentioned. Yes, Curtis Samuel, who I thought was underutilized in Washington, right? Like, when he comes over, I think you got 2 guys who are dynamic in the intermediate, who are dynamic short, and who can stretch it deep if you need them to stretch it deep. But with Coleman being able to stretch it deep, it allows them to work underneath. I think there's a good opportunity that both of those guys can be quality guys, especially if you're playing in some of these deep leagues, like an 18-team league or a 16-team league, where you're really having to make sure that you get guys who are not only going to be highly effective, but are just going to start, like, or get positive minutes. So from that standpoint, I'm with you. I think they've been criminally undervalued, and you can see both of them start to kind of work their way up, especially in single game and week-to-week fantasy, where people get a chance to kind of revisit what they messed up on the previous week.
Hey, Coach, on the way out, this is a quick hitters. This is tough decisions. I'm going to hit you with 2 players that are on the board. Who are you picking? Well, let's start off. Let's imagine you're kind of picking it too. Christian McCaffrey's off the board. You're thinking receiver. Is it CeeDee Lamb? Is it Tyreek Hill? Or do you even consider a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase? Who are you picking?
It's Tyreek Hill. I don't even think about it. Automatic.
Yeah.
It's locked in.
Now, McCaffrey's off the board. You want a running back, and you've got, this is PPR scoring, Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Bijan Robinson. I think Breece Hall has an embarrassment of riches around him right now on the offensive side, and Aaron Rodgers is a guy who likes to spread it around. And so with Bijan, we still don't know what the other pieces are going to be. Will Drake London have a breakout year? Will number 8 ever get it, together as a tight end so he can stop being a laughing stock of fantasy? We don't know, but what we do know is they're going to get Bijan Robinson the ball. So I would go there because I think he'll get more touches of the football than Breece Hall will.
Let's say you're drafting a little later in the first round and the guys that we just talked about are off, and you're standing there staring at Jonathan Taylor or Saquon Barkley now with the Philadelphia Eagles. Who do you like between those 2?
That's the best question that you've asked the entire time, because I think that this is a 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other type of situation. But I'll go with the motivation. Saquon Barkley feels as if the Giants acted as if he wasn't worth paying. Jonathan Taylor got paid by his team, right? So there's a level of comfort there. There's a level of irritance that Saquon Barkley has. And if we're calling a spade, I think Saquon Barkley is a better receiver out of the backfield than Jonathan Taylor is. And so because I think he'll get that upside as a pass receiver, I'll go with Saquon Barkley.
One more for you. We're into the second round, and there's still a bunch of talented receivers there. You have the option between Drake London, Nico Collins, Chris Olave, or Mike Evans. Who do you like the most out of those 4?
I'm going to go with the reliable. Think about more than just your regular league, your PPR league. Think about your guillotine. Think about your survivor league. Mike Evans is just a producer. Every single year, it's not going to look flashy. It's not going to look crazy. Mike Evans is going to get you double-digit touchdowns. He's going to get you over 1,000 yards. You know it's coming. You can't do anything about it. It's Mike Evans. I'm going there.
Death taxes and Mike Evans getting his footballs
Absolutely.
and getting into the end zone. Hey, just on the way, Coach, and it's been so much fun having you on the program. Is there a player or two? We always talk about sleepers or your guys, a guy that, you know, we're kind of getting into the draft, but a player that you always have in your queue that you want to have this year that you think has big upside as opposed to where they're drafting?
I think Isaiah Likely, the tight end for the Baltimore Ravens, is a guy who's not getting enough love. I know that, you know, they have Mark Andrews there, but if you look at how Isaiah Likely plays, he doesn't have to replace Mark Andrews. He can be a complement to Mark Andrews. And so I think when you have a guy like that can play as an inline tight end, that can play as a flexed out wide receiver, as a slot guy who has the athleticism, the hands, the physical, you know, just stature to be a matchup nightmare anywhere you put him, I think that guy has a great opportunity to shine. And I think he showed last year when Andrews was out that he is more than capable. I think he's coming for it all this year. And I think that Lamar Jackson believes in him. And that's why you'll see him have an uptick in production, even with Mark Andrews back.
Gene, this was awesome. I hope we can connect again sometime during the season. I had a lot of fun doing it. Gang, get at him at Gene Clemons on Twitter, Coach Gene Clemons. Again, I know from The Athletic, but just fill people in again on Fantasy Life and just where they can find all of your content as we get into opening week next week in the NFL, Gene.
Well, if you're a Giants fan, you can definitely find all of my Giants content at New York Giants on SI. I also do a daily YouTube podcast. It's also a regular podcast on Apple and Spotify called A Giant Issue. It's been doing great. I appreciate all the people that are watching that. Over at Fantasy Life, I work on fantasy. I work on college sports betting. I work on Dynasty. I'm all over the place. Catch me on the Tuesday LG show. Catch me on the Saturday morning show for college football betting. And then catch me on a Sunday morning NFL show with one of the greatest hosts I've ever met, Kendall Valenzuela. If you don't know her, you should know her. She's a dynamo. And I'll be there with her on Tuesdays and on Sundays doing that on Fantasy Life, Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life, which I'm really excited to be a part of this year.
Well, Barry's one of the godfathers of the fantasy game. You couldn't be surrounded by
the
a better
OG
team over there. Gene, thank you again for doing this. Good luck in your drafts before we kick off next week. And let's do this again soon. Have a great one. And by the way, if you're talking CFL with any of your friends going into this weekend, don't sleep on the Bombers on the road, +2.5 against the Riders in the Labor Day Classic.
I'll have to check with my guy Emery Hunt and see what he thinks, because you know he's always on top of that stuff.
Hey, dude, he's been killing it. I mean, some of his recaps, you let Emery know that right here from the heart of CFL country, we are absolutely loving the attention he's playing to our league. It's been phenomenal all year long. Great stuff from there. You have an awesome one, and thanks again for doing this.
Thank you.
There it is. The coach, Gene Clemons, at Gene Clemons on X. You can get all the links to his content there. That was a heck of a lot of fun. Oh, I cannot wait for kickoff next season. But I do have a draft tonight. We're going to bring Connor back in here. CFL 110 coming up in less than 15 minutes on the program. And I'll tell you what, let's just bring in Connor right now, because I do want to quickly mention the Goldeyes. And you know what? After that tough end last week, the fellas have turned it around. 4 straight wins, Connor. And as we get ready for the final homestand, Friday through Monday, playoff baseball next week, team seems to be back in a groove. And it all starts with the pitching. You mentioned another 10 strikeouts from Joey a couple nights ago, but another win right now, a day off tomorrow, but one more chance to get up to the ballpark tonight, and then 4 more games at home. This is going to be a heck of a lot of fun as we get closer to playoff baseball, and that's early September here in Winnipeg.
100%. Yeah, you mentioned Joey Matulovic had the 10 strikeout performance. I was just getting Landon Barrasa's stats up while you were saying that from last night. 7 innings pitched. He allowed 8 hits, 0 earned runs. He walked 1 batter and had 9 strikeouts. So like that's just another dominant performance on the mound for another Goldeyes pitcher. And that was in a 3-1 win. So that's back-to-back home wins for the Goldeyes. And then they're back at it tonight, like you said, off Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday through the weekend. The 4 games against Lincoln to close out the season. They have clinched the playoffs. They're still in a battle for first place in the West Division. So come check them out. Should be a gorgeous night tonight. It's cooled off a little bit, as you said. We're nearing September here.
Feels like playoff baseball time.
Playoff baseball time and time for NFL season. Exactly. So come out tonight or over the weekend if you're staying in town. Great push going by the Goldeyes right now as they look to secure first.
And listen, we had we were talking the other day with Mike, the new play-by-play broadcaster for the Fish, just about just how good this pitching staff has been. They are now 748 strikeouts for the year and only 219 walks, and I believe they're right in contention to set an all-time record for the league in that. So good times for the Fish. First pitch tonight is 6:30 at the ballpark, a day off tomorrow. And if you're in the city this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, get out to the ballpark and get ready for playoff baseball next week. All right, let's quickly head over to the track because I got to get our picks in for today. And we've got a great slate of races this evening at Assiniboia Downs. I'm going to start it off, and I did have one winner last night, but fell off a little bit. So this is a crucial night for me to continue my run on Michael Remus. Race number 2, we're going to go with not one of the top favorites. El Muzin opened at 5-1. We're going to go El Muzin to win. We're going to drop a triactor box for race number 3, 2, 4, 5. And again, this is a 6-horse race, so it might not be huge. These are the program selections and smart picks, albeit in different order. So we're going to throw that on a triactor box. And then actually in the next race, we're going to go with something a little different. We'll take a triactor. And I like the 7-horse to win, GM Foxy. So we're going to put GM Foxy in at first, and then box horses 1 Mr. Splash, 3 Better Luck Next Time, and 5 Bound for Heaven on a different way of putting that triactor box together. So hopefully put that together. In race number 5, no doubt about it, Lipstick Lady, one of our favorites. I'll actually maybe go an exactor box with Lipstick Lady and Bye Y'all. And then in race number 6, the final race I'm jumping on, Stay Happy is the favorite. I actually do like Exchequer, horse number 2 right now. But you can, if you want to go 4-2-1 on a box as well, don't mind that. They get to the post today at 7:30 p.m. And of course, you can always watch the great production the boys at Assiniboia Downs put on each and every week, or each and every racing night. Starting at 6:30, Kirk and Stretch will drop all of their picks for the night, and then they'll update you throughout the evening in between races if you want to tune in. And you can always, that of course is over at Assiniboia Downs. Give them a sub as well. Have some fun in the chat if you're betting on the races. Everyone else does. And don't forget, if you would like to bet remotely on Assiniboia Downs, you can head over to hpibet.com. All right, Connor, we got a few minutes before we get to CFL 110. That is going to be starting promptly at 3:10 p.m. today. Heading on over, are the Blue Jays, are you at all even paying attention to the Blue Jays anymore? Is it just one of those things like, I mean, the one thing I find them even more interesting to watch right now, I guess, because of the young players that are actually getting a chance. Like, we know there's a bunch of guys that are done. They made those trades. We'll see what happens with Vlad. I think Bo's as good as gone. But you see things like Addison Barger go at it, and you realize that, you know, there is some talent in this organization. It's great to see them play, even though this is absolutely, without a doubt, a lost season.
Yeah, a lost season. And I think the biggest question mark, like you said, is whether or not Vladdy is coming back, Bo's coming back, what happens there in the long term. But this is just a lost season. I've tuned out to the Blue Jays the last couple of weeks, and now with Labor Day starting and NFL season starting, I mean their season's almost done anyways. But I'm out on the Blue Jays now. Now that we're reaching Labor Day, it's officially sew up the season on the Blue Jays and look ahead to next year.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, I am sort of keeping an eye nightly on the Royals right now as they, I mentioned they have that crazy turnaround. They're actually playing right now. It looks like the Guardians are up 7-5 in the 9th inning, a getaway day for a number of these teams. So they did have an afternooner. Good slate of games, though, tonight, if you do want to throw down a little bit of a sprinkle. Great game between the Astros and Phillies. Astros are minus 120 on the road. The Phillies plus 102. And Taijuan Walker and Spencer Arrighetti are your matchups for tonight. But let's get to the CFL. We haven't really seen much line movement except for, listen, BC is 3-point favorites at home against Ottawa. We mentioned Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, still 2.5 points for the Roughriders. It's 5 for the Argos in the first of the two Monday Labor Day games. I am surprised, Connor, though, that the Elks are now 3-point underdogs. Listen, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little Edmonton-centric, talking to Dusty all the time on the lock shop, but I think Trey Ford gets back in. I think they get a big bolt of energy. Like, I like them to win that game at minus 137. I was stunned that it was 2.5, and I'm even more surprised that it's at 3 right now, considering where Calgary is at right now this season and the momentum that Edmonton has despite their close loss to Montreal last week.
Yeah, and I think that this is the game that I'm most intrigued of, other than obviously the Bomber game this weekend. Maybe Ottawa and BC as well, seeing how Nathan Rourke looks. And, if he struggles one more week, you got Vernon Adams, who is the odds-on favorite for MOP. What happens there eventually? So there's a lot of intrigue with these games. But that Elks Stamps game, I'm excited to watch that one because the Elks are now right there in that Western Conference playoff race. If they can catch Calgary, and they're the team they have to catch, and it's Labor Day, they're rivals, province rivals, excuse me. So that'll be another electric game on the schedule between two teams fighting for the playoffs and looking to make some noise in the West. I'm excited to watch that one.
One other thing that you might want to get to if you're at Coolbet and a golf fan is we got one more event on the PGA Tour this season. We'll kind of dap up our friends at Breezy Bend Country Club while we let you know about the Tour Championship. This is the weird tournament, Connor, where it's a staggered start. So Scotty Scheffler's starting at minus 10 and Xander's at minus 8. It actually makes for one of the, it's a tougher event to bet just normally. However, Coolbet does have winner without FedEx Cup starting strokes. So you can play it as a normal tournament. The guys, we just did the lock shop with Patty and Dusty earlier today. A guy we do really like to potentially win without starting strokes, Sam Burns at 18-1. And I like Ludwig Oberg as well at 16-1. If you don't want to get the guys at the top, the one guy that I think has a chance to win, Rory McIlroy, 22-1 to win the tournament. He's starting at, I believe, minus 4. But hey, you have a big first round. You can get right back in it. It's all there at Coolbet. If you haven't played at Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200. And don't forget, every week on the CFL, you can select one of your bets, whether it be a future, whether it be a parlay, a side, a total, for a 20% win boost. And I will admit, I've already used mine for this week, and it does involve a 3-gamer, and it does involve the visitors winning the Labor Day Classic. We'll have more on that. And tomorrow in the lock shop, Matt Iwanek joins me, and we will break down all 4 CFL games starting at noon tomorrow on the Edmonton Sports Talk channel. Speaking of those CFL games, CFL 110 is going to get going in just a couple of minutes. But again, Breezy Bend brings you all of our golf reports here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Played there last weekend. The course is absolutely immaculate. The work that they've done to change that course with all the hole improvements is amazing. If you're thinking about a great long-term home for you and your family at one of Winnipeg's top private courses with an amazing social scene, Breezy's the spot. Talk to Corey Johnson at the clubhouse or find out more online at breezybend.ca. And shout out to our friends at Aikens Lake, just finishing up another incredible fishing season. You can hit them up at aikenslake.com for any remaining availability in the short strokes of this fishing season, but start planning now for a dream trip in 2025 to one of the jewels of Manitoba, where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg with world-class fishing and even more world-class hospitality at aikenslake.com. All right, Connor, so before we go, are you at the ballpark tonight?
I am at the ballpark tonight, and for people who aren't, aabaseball.tv, if you're watching the game, I'll be running the stream graphics, so things like when the batter's stats pop up or the pitcher's stats pop up, all those things, I'm running it behind the scenes in the Remus role.
What can't this guy do? What can't this guy do?
Killing it.
Of course, Trevor Curl with the call, and I guess they'll put the radio call as well on those broadcasts, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great production, I have to admit. I mean, you see what the guys at Assiniboia Downs are doing, what the Fish are able to do with all these bright young minds. It is a heck of a way to watch the game and stay on top of it if you can't be there in person. But the sun's out. I think it's going to rain tomorrow, which is perfect because the Goldeyes are off. Great night to get out to the ballpark yourself. Thanks again to Mitch Jansen for doing an amazing job getting us through the show. Thank you, as always, to Connor Hrabchak. We'll look forward to having Connor back tomorrow. And to the coach, Gene Clemons, Ken Wiebe, Brandon Rewucki for a great one today. But don't go anywhere, folks. We're not done on Winnipeg Sports Talk this afternoon because CFL 110 starts right now, right here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube channel. Shout out to you podcast listeners and everyone with us in chat. We'll see you right now over in the CFL 110 broadcast. Thanks again for being with us today on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.